have been 13,672 new COVID-19 infections and 317 new deaths. From tomorrow, though, everyone over the age of 18 will be able to get the COVID-19 vaccine. But is that a good move? The country doesn't exactly have millions of excess vaccine doses, right? So let's find out. Professor Mosa Moshabela, UKZN's acting Deputy Vice-Chancellor in the Research and Innovation Department, joins me now live from Durban. Thanks for your time, Prof. So is this the right move? What do you reckon?
Yeah, Shahan, good evening, and to the viewers. I think it's an excellent move. We've been calling for this over a week now, requesting that this be considered, given the fact that we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown in the daily uptake of vaccines, and the country has the capacity for 300,000 a day, and we were doing around 150,000, 160,000. And I think that, because we are getting about 20 million doses of vaccines in the month of August, that actually put us in a good state. Instead of sitting with a lot of vaccines in stock and in storage, it's better to use them up so that people can then have the lead time they need to develop immunity, so that towards the end of the year we can come much closer to normality as possible. And in the youth group, age cohort of 18 to 34 really carries the largest population in terms of the cohorts of 18 million people in the adult population. And really it will make a big difference. And I think that they are quite influential also in society in terms of perceptions around how we view vaccines and how we embrace vaccines.
Yeah, definitely. And what about the issue of wastage, Prof? Do we know that because we've seen this hesitancy over the past 2 to 3 weeks, whether we've wasted any vaccines, or does this move actually save us in terms of wasting doses?
Actually not, because the vaccines that were due to expire, that were given an expiry date of end of mid-August and extended to September, they were used up. So those vaccines were used up, and the vaccines that we now have good lead time in terms of expiry date. So the expiry date is not the problem. I think the main issue was, one, that we are sitting with a lot of vaccines in stock that we are not using up quickly enough. We are sitting with a large capacity to vaccinate a lot of people. We are not optimizing that. And thirdly, there was an outcry that there's a lot of people in the youth age cohort of 18 to 34 that are quite enthusiastic to get vaccinated, and they were not getting vaccinated. And at the same time, there was a lot of misinformation that was happening. And these vaccines, you benefit from them, and the experience, the messages are shaped by the experiences age cohorts have. We've seen that the messages shift in the older age cohorts, and we want to see that shift also in the young age cohort. And lastly, Shahan, is the issue of comorbidities. There's a lot of young people with comorbidities who were not qualifying for vaccines in the age cohort of 18 to 34. And this was an injustice, because initially the country meant to make vaccines available to everyone with comorbidities and risk factors. And so this really helps us to get closer to that much faster, rather than waiting for the 1st of September.
Yeah, that is definitely the case. I know that many experts argued people with comorbidities should have actually qualified for this from the start. And many people have passed away because of those comorbidities after infection. My sister was actually one of those people last month. So it is a difficult time. So let's talk then about younger children, under 18s. I just spoke to a doctor in Durban who's raising concerns about children who have comorbidities, who are at risk of actually dying. I saw reports that 2 children died after contracting the virus in KwaZulu-Natal. What research do we have around this just yet?
Yeah, it concerns us, Shahan. SAPRA has only approved vaccines for use up to 18 years in South Africa. But globally, there is an acceptance that there is enough research to now support use of vaccines for children up to 12 years for now. And there are studies to look at, children even beyond that, the 12 years. But I think generally there's consensus that we could go up to 12 years. But that would require a whole review in South Africa of the approvals with SAPRA. And also then it will also require a revisit in terms of the stock that we have ordered around vaccines. But I think that among scientists, there is a consensus that we can go up to 12 years, except we have to follow regulatory procedures.
So let's talk about the numbers, Prof, because they're doing a seesaw effect here. I was speaking to the NICD yesterday because on Monday the numbers were low, and then we saw it increase since Tuesday, Wednesday, today again quite high. The answer I got was that not enough people are testing on weekends and people rush on Monday to test. Is that the reality? Is that what you read into it?
Shahan, there could be many explanations. It could be one of those. But what I'm reading into it is that we began to see a slowdown in the reduction in infections when we moved to alert level 3. And when schools opened, then we also saw a little bit of a jump. And now there's a number of reports around clusters in schools. And we saw this even before the third wave, that schools, they contributed quite a bit in terms of cluster outbreaks to the infections just before we saw the spike for the third wave. And this seesaw that we are seeing in the long tail that we are seeing, where instead of seeing a straight downward curve, as we've seen in the previous wave, we are seeing the sort of tail that seems to be elongated third wave. That bothers me a lot. And I think that nationally, that's what it looks like. But when you take it province per province, you're seeing small spikes of infections, and we are hoping that they're not going to be sustained. And I really hope that the country can really look closely as to the drivers of infections, including the cluster outbreaks in schools, and be serious around addressing this. I think at the moment, the issue of how we manage infections in schools, which I consider daily social gatherings, is the elephant in the room in South Africa at the moment. We can talk about many other forms of risks and super spreaders, but it's very difficult to engage with the ones around schools because the argument that kids are lagging behind in education is also quite strong, and that not all the kids can learn from home. That argument is also strong. So we really need a resolution. Otherwise, we'll stay in the third wave for much longer than we need to.
Yeah, that is concerning. It's a tough one, though, right? Because the balancing act there is pretty difficult to get right. I want to talk to you about events now, because we have, like, the Rage Festival, I read, the Plet Rage Festival is apparently going ahead later this year, only for people who are vaccinated. Is that wise?
Shahan, it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea in the sense that, one, it could encourage people to understand that we can get back to normal activity if we vaccinate. I think that there's really a good argument to be made in that regard. I am not a big fan of limiting people's individual rights, but I think that there is recognition that we also have collective rights, and vaccines have become public good. We can't put other people at risk of infection just because we want our own individual freedom. So I support the principle of prioritizing vaccination if people are going to go to social gatherings in later on. But there is a number of conditions that one needs to look at. One is that people who are going to go, who are vaccinated, they need to have achieved the full vaccination status. You can't go a day after your first dose of Pfizer and then say that you're going to go to a rave party. That can cause problems for us. They need to be fully vaccinated 2 weeks after their second dose of Pfizer, for example, at a month after a dose of Johnson & Johnson. The second thing is that most of the population needs to be vaccinated, because really the advantage of having a high coverage of vaccination, of full vaccination in the country, is that it helps to break transmission. And it helps to, if people go to social gatherings and get exposed, when they come back and in contact with others, many other people that they may come in contact with would be protected. And that's why in European countries, you can see people go into games, because they are more than 50%, more than 60% vaccinated as a population. So we need to also aim to be there by the time that we get to December, if we really want to have a little bit more of a normal life as we hope for.
Yeah, that normality you spoke of, I guess everybody's craving it, right? Because it's been a long year and a half, going on 2 years if we don't get it right. Do you think we're going to reach those vaccine targets to actually achieve population immunity?
Yeah, I think that population immunity really is important when you are able to break transmission. But what we've seen with SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 is that the virus is not constant. And because the virus is not constant, even if you vaccinate 75% or 80% of the population, you may not be able to break transmission, because there are new variants that may pop up against the vaccines that we have, and you find that we have breakthrough infections. So that's the one thing where that makes the population immunity slippery. But we have seen so far that it's still possible to reduce the transmission of infection when most people are vaccinated. So that high coverage we still have to strive for, because it can help us achieve a little bit more of normality, even though we may have to use precautions, but we may still be able to engage in many of the social activities and events that we are otherwise not able to engage in.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate the insight, as always, Professor Mosa Moshabela.